Signs Unscripted. I'm Robin Donovan, Signs of the Times Editor-in-Chief, and with me today is...
Eric Larsen.
Hey Eric, how are you?
I'm doing just fine.
So folks, if you're thinking that Eric's name sounds familiar, it should, because Eric has written 2 recent columns for Signs of the Times talking about workforce development and the needs for basically education in the sign industry. So Eric, what sparked you to write for us?
Well, actually, I work for Wagner Electric Sign Company out of Ohio, and I run the marquee design division. I do all the design work for the historic marquees that we produce. And Mark, the president of the company, recently put up a whole bunch of help wanted ads because we've got a lot of work coming up. And just the lack of qualified people. Applying for jobs it was unheard of. And so Mark and I were talking about it. I said, well, what do you think the problem is? And Mark says, I just don't think people know how to do signs.
And there's a lot of people out of work, so theoretically there should be, there's enough people needing jobs. Yeah, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you and I have been talking, and one of the things, we've had a few conversations, one of the things you mentioned to me was that you felt like you found a model in the construction industry for kind of doing what the sign industry hasn't yet figured out. So tell me about that.
That's right. I do a lot of work with several construction companies throughout the United States, and they have a system called ABC School, which is American Builders and Contractors. And it's basically a school set up to where when they hire somebody, they send them to this school and they teach, the crafts of carpentry in the construction business. And it's been going on for many, many, many years. And it would just, a light bulb went off. I mean, the sign industry is so unique in that we have electricians, we have, artists, we have, the fabricators. It's not necessarily a fabricator in our industry is not a fabricator. A fabricator in our industry is actually an artist that just works in metal or whatever. And there's just no school to go learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah, there's I think the way I phrased it when I was writing about this was there's no one-stop shop to go from zero to fabricated signs. Right? There's you can do a lot of legislative work, you can do a lot of workshops, you can get certificates, but if you don't know anything and you want to have a job at a sign company or you have some basic skills, there's no one-stop location. And so I think one of the interesting things, because this conversation has been had, right, without a lot of solutions. And one of the interesting things that you and I have talked about is just the funding concept, right? And I think that was one of my early questions to you is, who's going to pay for this? Because I know a lot of people have talked about, it's just tough because sign companies have smaller profit margins, I think, than other industries. Or that's what I've been told by sign companies. And so it's this whole idea of they don't have all this money to be educating people. So how do you get around that? Or how did the construction industry get around that?
The construction industry does it with memberships into the construction alliances that they have. Certain amounts of funds go to the ABC school. A lot of the sponsors, a lot of the equipment builders for the construction industry, such as tool makers and welders and things like that. The people that make products that are bought by the construction industry, they also sponsor the program, and they will provide the equipment necessary for the classes. So that way, actually, it's a win-win for them, because the people that are going to the class are learning on their equipment already. And when that person goes to purchase their own tools or purchase their own, whatever they need to purchase, well, they're like, hey, I've already used this before. Why should I try something else? And so it continues on.
Yeah.
But there's some other ideas that I've come up with, to help fund this. I think we're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we had, I don't know how much you want to reveal, but yeah, we had talked about different ideas and using video and that sort of thing, which is obviously attractive to people in the era of COVID, we were just talking in a staff meeting today that Google has decided to work remotely until June of 2021, which seems ominous because doesn't Google know, Google knows before I know what I want to have for dinner, what that meal is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
they should know when COVID's going to be over with.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I was like, is Google telling us that it's another year? Is that
Yeah.
signal? But so, I mean, yeah, how do you see the pandemic playing into some of these needs?
Well, it's hard right now because the sign industry is kind of slowing down a little bit unless you are in a specialty area, kind of like we are at Wagner Electric Sign, to where we're doing specialty marquees and things like that. The smaller vinyl shops, I can see where they're suffering right now because there's not a lot of people out there doing the
Driving.
work, or a lot of
Yeah.
people, buying things. I mean, it's a giant trickle down system, let's face it. But the thing that people have to realize is that if you have a business and you want to attract people, you have to have a sign up front.
Yeah.
And so it's just right now it's slow, but I can see it starting to pick up again with the stimulus packages that are coming out. I think people are going to try to invest in things, to bump their business up a little bit more. So when that happens, we're going to be here in the sign industry going, we still don't have anybody here to work for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know, and some of the challenge of, the one area where I think the sign industry has good education is with vinyl and adhesive vinyl and wrapping. And then I've heard sign companies at wrap workshops and things talk about, well, I train this person and then I spend all this money and then they go and compete with me. And I think
Yep.
on some level that's really a threat, and on some level it's a little bit it's a really zoomed in view of that fear of they're going to immediately leave. Like I always want to
Well,
think
that's
about other
absolutely. Yeah.
factors going into,
Mhm.
yeah, but how do you kind of respond to those concerns?
It's a risk. It's just like anything, when you're in business, it's a risk. You got to find the right person that you think is going to stick around. I mean, there's a lot of hungry kids out there right now that don't necessarily want to go to college, but yet have a lot of artistic talent, have some type of fabrication talent, or maybe they like, dealing with electricity and wiring things or fabricating things, and they don't want to go to school, but they don't know where to start. Those are the kids that we need to find. Right now, the average age of somebody in a sign shop, I would bet, would be between 30 and 50 years old.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, or we just don't have them.
Mm.
They're just not there. So we gotta do something.
Yeah, I've considered whether could there be summer jobs at sign companies, and that's tough with specialized equipment and safety types of concerns. But I know,
Mhm.
as I've seen, ISA really wants to promote Sign Manufacturing Day. I think that's a great event, and it does seem like students are pretty interested. I mean, somewhat interestingly, they're very interested when I've seen them in the neon bending.
Oh
I've,
yeah,
and that's kind of, I don't
that's
know
a
how
lost
many,
art.
yeah, and how many neon bending jobs are there really? But of course, that's very visual. They like the fire. It seems dangerous. It's
Hmm.
artistic. It's really hands-on and cool. So, I mean, what do you think about student opportunities and getting actual kid? We call some younger people kids, but what do you think about getting actual students into the shop?
I think that's what we have to figure out. And it's, face it, it's not like it was when in 1978 when I was 12 years old, and I happened to, my neighbor was getting his boat lettered by a sign guy, and I happened to go watch, and he kind of took me from there.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. Kids aren't exposed to the sign industry at all. And unless you know somebody that's in the sign industry, or you have some artistic talent and you look for the sign industry, that's the only way you get into it.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to attract the people here. And I think the manufacturing day is a good start. Absolutely.
Hmm.
But I've got some ideas to where we could possibly even start cooperating with the local skill centers and the community colleges, and maybe add some type of curriculum to where we do signs.
Hmm.
And it's going to take a lot of work, but I mean, it's something that's got to be done.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is the construction industry is doing it, which for me resolves a lot of questions of, is it possible at all? They are a larger industry, but not so different, right? If someone has no idea what the sign industry is, I say, well, it's kind of like construction, but it's signs instead of buildings. Like, right, you finish the building, you put on the sign.
Right.
So what's next for you, Eric? And how can people contact you if they're interested in talking about this more?
Well, you can email me at eric@wagnersign.com if you have questions. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me because my phone rings off the hook constantly. And I usually start work about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I design until about 11 o'clock, and I don't even turn my phone on. But I think my next step is, and I've had some discussions today, as a matter of fact, that's why I was a little late getting here. I had some discussions with a local skill center and asked, hey, would you be interested in starting some type of sign program to bring kids in? Because they're finding out some of the kids that, and I didn't realize this, some of the kids that they have doing their welding classes and their plumbing classes and things like that, they want to be in the industry trade. They want to learn a trade. What they're being taught right now with the construction, that doesn't really turn them on because these are artistic kids and they want to do something that's a little bit more creative. So there's a possibility there. I think we're on the right track.
All right. So Eric at wagnersigns.com. I'll see if I can add that into the video so we don't have to spell it out.
No S on the end, just Wagner Signs.
Yeah, Eric. Yeah. All right, Eric. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been fun.
All right, thank you.